Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara T Designs and today I have this stunning Floral Trims alcohol ink card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to use an A2 sized base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I will also add a black mat around it and use a piece of Yupo paper for the actual alcohol ink. So I'm trimming down my black mat here. It is going to be about a 1/8 of an inch smaller than the A2 sized base, just because I want a really thin border around my Yupo paper. So here you can see I'm just eyeballing the measurement and then I double check it against the base that I have. And then I brought in a piece of Yupo paper. It comes in 5 by 7, but I am going to trim it down. I always save the pieces. I think that they could be useful in some kind of other project. I just haven't quite figured out what yet, but I always save the extra pieces of Yupo. And then here I've trimmed this down to be another about 1/8 of an inch smaller than that black mat. And then we're going to jump right into using the alcohol inks. I do generally like to create my background before I worry about anything else in case I mess it up, or this is kind of where I find, because this is really the focal of this card. I mean, the flowers do stand out very vibrantly as well, but really this is kind of the focal. So I want to change my idea or anything at this stage. This is where I would probably start to do something a little different. So I like to kind of work on the biggest part of my card first, which in this case is this background. So I'm going to go in a rainbow order of alcohol inks just because you guys, if you've been with me for a little bit, you know that I love vibrant colors. I love rainbows. I love just bright, beautiful things. So I'm always really drawn to the color palette that allows me to kind of play in that realm. And so I started out with raspberry, and then I used Splendor, which is a pearl. So I pretty much ended up going regular alcohol ink, pearl alcohol ink, regular alcohol ink, pearl alcohol ink. Not intentionally, it was just because the colors that I have, I don't own them all. I only own, like a handful of them. So I kind of chose the colors that I liked that went in that rainbow-ish theme. And it just happened that they ended up being, pearls and alcohol inks, which I think add a lot of interest to the background. So I started with raspberry, then I went to Splendor, then I did sunshine yellow, Elixir, and Tranquil, which are both pearls. So I guess those two went together. And then the last one is Amethyst, which is a little bit of a darker blue purple than I had intended, but it was the only purple I could find, which is shocking because purple's one of my favorite colors, but that's kind of just how this worked out. So the orange, the green, and the blue are all pearls, and then the pink, the yellow, and the purple are all regular alcohol inks. So you can see that they go beautifully together. No issues at all. You do want to use blending solution, especially with the pearls, because they do have a medium in them that helps, like they don't dry well otherwise, I've found personally. So I do like to bring in, and I like to have the blending solution when I'm working on a background like this anyway, just because I want the colors to mingle together. That's kind of just, I love that. And I always choose colors that work well side by side. So I'm never concerned about them mixing and making like brown or a gray or kind of just a dingy color. All of the colors I have side by side here, I know will go beautifully together, so there's no concern there. And then at this point, I loved the background, but I really wanted to add just a touch more texture in the background. So you can see I'm just kind of slowly adding little drops of alcohol ink using the air blower tool to just move them around. And then I'm going to go in and use 1 drop of each color in a random area on its line of color, just to add a little more texture and interest again into the background. So this isn't really necessary. I think that my background at this point was beautiful. It's just one of those things where when I start playing, I struggle to stop. So I end up kind of just going and going and going until I force myself to stop playing with things. So I did find here, and then I added a little drop of the blending solution inside of the circle that I had put of that alcohol ink, and then kind of just, for the most part, left it alone. I kind of tried to move it around a little bit, but I kind of like that circle shape in the center ones. And then for the purple, I did end up moving it out a little bit more just to create more purple on the bottom of this card. And then at this point, it is completely dry. I set it aside for quite a while and drank a cup of tea and did some other things. So it is dry at this point, and I'm going to stamp with Stazon ink on top of my Yupo paper. This is the first time I've used Stazon, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because it's kind of like a staple in the crafting world, but I've never used it. So I bought an ink pad. Actually, my husband went and picked it up for me while I was at work. And this is what I'm using to stamp this stunning floral trims stamp. This is a new Tim Holtz stamp. It just came out, I think, like a month ago, maybe not even quite that long ago. And I just got my hands on mine. So I had to do something with it because you guys also know that I love florals. So I'm going to use that. And I did stamp it 3 times. Luckily for me, my paper did not shift in my Misti at all. So I chose to stamp it 3 times, and that honestly, it just really built up how dark it was, because I wanted it to stand against this very colorful background. I mean, it's going to blend in somewhat because I am stamping it on top, but I didn't want it to not be like you would look at that and not see the flowers. That kind of makes sense. Like I needed it to stand up a little bit more. And then this is where I ended up actually changing the idea of my card. The florals didn't stand out enough for my liking. So I cleaned my stamp really, really well. And then I brought in a piece of Velum and my Versamark ink, and I'm going to white heat emboss the same image. I mean, you guys saw the card, so you know what I'm about to do, but I'm going to white heat emboss my florals on this piece of vellum, and then I'm going to fussy cut out the flowers. This is an extra step, but I think that it really makes this card pop, like just this white and vellum, so that you can still see the colors behind it, but it just really looks beautiful with these flowers. So I thought that would be like a stunning way to kind of make it so you could actually see the flowers better without stealing the show from that super vibrant rainbow background. So it's kind of my thought process there. So I'm going to heat set this so it's all smooth and melted, and then I'm just going to fussy cut it. And now I know a lot of people don't enjoy fussy cutting, but this is sped up. So obviously I don't fussy cut this quickly. You know, I slow down, and it's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be for this. Like I left a little border on the outside, so that I could, have a little bit of room beside the embossing powder, because I didn't want to cut it off, if that kind of makes sense. Like if my scissors hit it, it kind of wants to flake off a little bit, and I really didn't want that. And I did also bring in this stamp set to sit in front of me so that I knew what was a petal and what was like a leaf, because I only wanted the flowers. I didn't want any of the leaves, and I was struggling a little bit to tell what was what. So you're going to see me compare it every once in a while to the stamp set so that I can be aware of what is a leaf, what is a flower, and what I do want to trim off and what I don't want to trim off. So I did have a little bit of a struggle with the one flower that's at the top, just because there's actually a leaf that sits on top of it. And I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to leave the leaf or cut the leaf off. And in the end, I chose to cut the leaf off, mostly because I didn't want to bring attention to the leaves. And I felt like it kind of took away to have one leaf standing up with the flowers. Now, not necessary. Again, you could leave the leaf. It would still be beautiful. It was just kind of my thought process on what I wanted it to look like in the end. So, and you can see like I'm checking the stamp set fairly often to make sure that I'm not cutting off a petal of a flower, because it's going to look funny when I go to adhere it on top of the stamped images if there's like a petal missing from this cutout piece. But I'm going to get to the part here where there is a leaf. You're going to see it right now. Actually, it's just before where my scissors are, and there is a leaf. So at this point I left the leaf because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just wasn't sure, and I didn't want to cut it off and then, regret that I had cut it. So I left it, but in the end, I am going to cut it off. And then I end up having to cut just a little bit of that flower off anyways, because it hangs over the edge of my stamped piece. So it wasn't necessary to leave it. See here, you can see that I'm making sure that I'm cutting petals and not leaves, or cutting, leaves and not petals, so that I could tell what needed to be cut and what shouldn't be. But it did take me a little bit to do this, but honestly, it wasn't a big deal fussy cutting. Like, it was pretty simple, because you can't really see if I missed a little bit of an area, simply because, the sides of it aren't really what's important. And then I really wanted to add some silver glitter to the center of these. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. There's no other silver in this design, but I really wanted it to just catch the light. So I pulled out some silver glitter that's in my stash. I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to do nails professionally, and I had this left over from when I did nails. So I have a bunch of really pretty glitter that was from that period in my life, and I use it in my crafting, usually in shaker cards or whatever. And I just thought this would be stunning. So I sprinkled that on. And then to kind of cover any of the areas that, because there were slightly bigger chunks that might have had glue and not had any glitter, I brought in my Rock Candy glitter by Tim Holtz as well, because it's a super fine glitter, but it's super sparkly and really pretty. So I added that on top of this just to kind of, if there was any areas that there was some glue, but there wasn't anything adhered there, this would kind of fill in those gaps and then just give an extra shiny sparkle without stealing the show. And then I decided that it had to be popped up. Don't ask me why. This would have been fine stuck down, but I like to add dimension and do things that are a little bit different. So I did end up using really thin 3D foam squares just behind where I put the glitter. And that's how we're going to adhere this piece to the Yupo paper. I did struggle a little bit to get to it here. I don't know if it was because I used a little bit of liquid glue on top of the foam squares simply to keep them from popping off. But I mean, Yupo's plastic, so I don't know what would have been better here. Maybe some double-sided tape would have been a better option, like on the foam square. But I did eventually get it to adhere. It just took a bit longer for the glue to kind of set and stay where I needed it to. So you can see here, like I'm lining it up. I wiggle it around until it's where I want it to be. And then I press down to make it stay there. I did also at one point set my Misti on top of it so that it would just sit there and just have a chance to dry. So I did also do that because I wasn't sure how to get it to adhere well because it wanted to shift a bit on the Yupo paper. And then, as I said, I am going to cut off just this one piece of the flower that's hanging off because that's how the design is in what I've done with the stamping. And then I'm going to adhere all my layers together. So I do jump between Nuvo Deluxe glue and Art Glitter glue. Not a big deal. Just it's my preference. But I mean, use whatever you have. Any adhesive would work for this. I just prefer liquid glue because it gives me a chance to move the panel around because I generally don't get it centered the first time I stick it down, which is why I kind of avoid like tape runners and that, not to adhere things because my lining things up skills are not always the best. And then I'm going to adhere this now down to the A2 base as well. So that is the card I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. It's kind of a different card, but I think it turned out stunning. I'm really, really happy with the outcome of this one. It's kind of funny when I bust out my alcohol inks to work on something, I get all these different ideas to kind of play with the alcohol inks, and then I'll like put them away and I kind of forget about them for a while, and then I'll bust them back out again, and then it's just like a kid in a candy store. Like I just have a blast. So I had a lot of fun with this. I'm just gonna hold it up here so you guys can check it out in all its glory, especially those really sparkly centers. I think that they really just catch the light and look stunning. So I would love to hear what you guys think. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.